Chapter 2. The meeting of the joint heads was about to start, and people began to take their seats around the U-shaped conference table within a secure room at the Pentagon. Dr. Palmer stood with his NASA colleagues at the back of the room, waiting for everyone to take their seats. He was feeling anxious and couldn't wait for this thing to get started. "There's some big suits here. That's the head of DARPA over there." Matthew's friend and NASA colleague, John, surreptitiously pointed out a man about to take his seat. "And I'm pretty sure that's a high-up from the NSA," he indicated another man in an identical suit and tie. "I don't know what the head of the EPA is doing here, though. How does this concern them?" He pointed out an officious-looking man, impatiently looking at his watch. "At least they're taking it seriously," Matthew said, though it made him feel even more nervous. All these important people were here to listen to him. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a steadying breath. At least they'd shown up. It was now his job to persuade them to actually do something. He saw Agent Nichols with a group of Homeland Security officials, and Nichols gave him a nod. For some reason, Nichols' small gesture of encouragement steadied Matthew's nerves. The doors were closed and locked behind them, and the Director of Homeland Security stood up. "Thank you all for coming. I trust you've read your briefs and you're all up to speed. NASA first informed us of this potential threat 7 months ago, and we have since gained more data on this zero region, as we're calling it. Dr. Matthew Palmer of NASA is going to give us an update now." Dr. Palmer. Matthew made his way to the front of the room. "Good morning. I have a quick presentation to show you. John, can you dim the lights, please?" He proceeded to give his presentation on the large screen covering the front wall that detailed the threat in explicit detail, a slide showing the dark shape of the zero region in a false color temperature map, and a diagram of the solar system showing the likely timeline when each planet would encounter the zero region, including the Earth in 365 days. He then played a video from Dr. Yates' lab, showing objects reverting backwards in time. The video was fascinating, and there were many surprised murmurs among the small audience. The presentation finished and the room's lights were restored. Matthew looked around at the serious faces. "Are there any questions?" "Dr. Palmer, can you give us your own assessment on how likely this could harm us and what level of threat this constitutes?" a general in military uniform asked. Matthew gave him a nod. "This is likely something the Earth has never encountered before. The Voyager probes and the lab experiments you've just seen suggest it's reasonable to expect this could have major consequences for life on this planet. But thanks to the work of Dr. Rebecca Yates, we may have a real opportunity to prevent or mitigate those potential consequences." The Director of Homeland Security came and stood beside Matthew. "What Dr. Palmer is saying, in a nutshell, is that we want you to take this seriously and prepare accordingly." "What do you need from us?" the same general asked. Matthew answered, "To start with, we need immediate funding and resources for Dr. Yates. She's going to need better facilities and top personnel, the best you can spare. She'll need reactors and access to any new technology she could use, and the military will need to implement any large-scale plan of action to deploy the devices when the time comes." "Dr. Palmer, isn't it fair to say this new quantum technology is equally a threat to the world if anything goes wrong trying to develop such a powerful technology, especially considering the time constraints we're now under?" A woman in military uniform, sitting next to the general, asked. "We could end up destroying the world or sending it back to the Dark Ages trying to save it. Obviously, we need to proceed carefully and ensure there are safeguards in place, such as using small prototypes for testing," Matthew said, hoping that would satisfy her concerns. "I think doing nothing at this stage would be the far greater risk." "How much of this information are we sharing with our allies or foreign governments?" a woman from the Department of Defense asked. "We're not sharing anything with anyone at this time, and no ETA on when that's likely to change. The head of the NSA answered. You don't think we should share what we know about the Zero region with our allies? The woman asked. We're not giving even a hint of the existence of this technology to anyone. That includes our allies. We need to keep this in-house, the head of the NSA responded. If you agree to place this project under DARPA's direction, we can take the lead on this and give Dr. Yates all the resources at our disposal. The head of DARPA spoke up from the back of the room. You'll still need the president's go-ahead for any nuclear or military deployments or any international cooperation necessary, as well as the additional funding this is going to require, a Pentagon official said. The officious-looking man from the EPA spoke up. I'm the designated White House liaison for this meeting, and I can tell you right now, the president is not interested in funding this science experiment. You've spoken to the president about it, the head of Homeland asked. I'm not about to take this to the president. He has more pressing concerns to worry about. I speak for him when I say this doesn't seem like a genuine threat we need to worry about. It sounds more like a contrivance to get a boost to someone's budget. We can discuss this directly with the president. Matthew started to say. He's not interested in this kind of thing. It would only bore him. If that is all there is, gentlemen, I consider this meeting at an end. He rose and made his way to the door while everyone watched him go. He banged his fist on the door to be let out, and a guard opened the door from the outside. Matthew stood there as they all watched the man leave. It was his job to persuade these people, and he couldn't just let this man go. He went after him, catching the man in the corridor with a hand to his shoulder. The head of the EPA spun around in anger, and Matthew quickly removed his hand. It's Scott, isn't it? Listen, Scott, we at NASA think this is of critical importance. Let us present it to the president so he can make an informed decision. The man was indignant. If you'd come to me with a genuine threat like an asteroid heading for Earth, and you wanted funds for some way-out energy force field or something, I would have been open to supporting that. But this is ridiculous. You're saying this cold region is a threat even though it's less than 3 degrees colder than the rest of space. You have no evidence it'll do anything to us, apart from some lab experiments, which I admit are interesting, but they don't prove anything. You're coming to us with speculation and want us to fund some huge project based on what? It's not going to happen. This is no huge project. It's relatively small, actually, considering this is potentially an extinction-level threat. Surely you can see it's a small price to pay to ensure against that level of threat. Matthew could already see by the man's expression that this kind of reasoning wasn't going to convince him, so he changed tactics. We'll owe you a favor. Anything you want. We'll take your family on a tour of NASA facilities, and you can see a rocket launch. We just need 10 minutes with the president. That's all. The head of the EPA seemed to relent a little. You'd be wasting your time. He's not interested in science and facts and figures. We'll make it interesting for him with lots of pictures. 10 minutes, that's all we ask. The head of the EPA grimaced, as if it pained him to give in. I'll see what I can do, but I'm not promising anything.